Here.
President Tata. Here. And Ms. Garrett is absent tonight. Let's see, I believe we have one change to the agenda, Ms.
That's correct. There's one change. Please remove item 5A, Student of the Month. The student was unable to join us, so we'll bring this back at a later date.
Okay, thank you. Do we have approval of the agenda with that change?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We have approval of the minutes.
Move to approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And the communications. Let's see. We have one. Oceana, their student trustees, Ms. Her and Ms. Liang, did not attend, but they send this report. Recently, we had a first virtual career day. Despite having to stay in one class and experiencing a new kind of event, it went very smoothly. All the students had many questions to ask and were very engaged. In Advisory Council, we've talked about COVID safety and are often met with requests to go back into online learning, to which we respond, we can't. Many people are concerned about the infection rate. Many teachers have provided spaces for the students to talk about what's going on, which has been very helpful and considerate. Okay. Ms. Salahuddin, do you have a board report?
Yes. I'm really sick. Jake, I'm having problems connecting to the.
Tim,
Oh,
today.
Tim, sorry, we didn't see you over there. Top of your head. I'm having issues connecting to the internet. Hi. So, yeah, it's, as usual, I am still concerned about our COVID issues. While I'm glad that the infection rate seems to be going down a bit, it's still much higher than it's ever been. And so I'm glad that we're moving forward and getting masks for every student. I know we'll have other parts of the agenda to talk about that. And really just thinking about long-term plans. So that has been what I've been focused on in having meetings with the county and talking to other community leaders about how do we start thinking about this in long-term and not just constantly trying to fix the bridge while we're on it. So one of the immediate issues is looking at the testing and the availability of community testing. Right now, Curative is a bit overwhelmed, and with both staffing at the labs and on site, so they've only been able to see around 250 to 300 people per day, which is pretty low. And the site at Jefferson High School, they've been actually able to see a larger amount of people, and they've been really good now that we've extended the hours from 7 to 7. Of not turning people away and not requiring appointments, but that is only going to continue through the end of January. And then, so working with the county to see if we can find a solution to extend it to February, which we're working on, and then have something else that comes in the interim. And then on long term, whose responsibility is it going to be? Is it going to be the county? Is it going to be the state or the federal government for like ongoing community testing and other support services for the community, because most of those have gone away. There's a lot of people missing work. There's a lot of people that need a place to shelter, and there's nowhere for them to go currently. So all those things are on my mind because we know that the best way for students to succeed in school is for them to have safe, healthy, secure environments, and right now it doesn't feel like any of those things. So that's what I've been spending most of my time on outside of JUHSD board stuff.
Thank you. Trustee Abuzaria?
So something that came up yesterday during our advisory council meeting was we've been using our social media team has been like more active on our Instagram page. So we've been like posting like sort of like key information from the superintendent updates, and like sometimes we get questions from students, and like a question that came up was about like Lunar New Year not being like an observed day off in like our district, and so like maybe that's something that like can be negotiated in like teacher contracts, right, with the union in like future years, maybe something to consider. And then another thing that came up was like considering like I know last year there was some leeway or like some sort of like yeah, I think like leeway with like graduation requirements, like if students were missing a little like some credits because of the pandemic, we were a little more like lenient with allowing them to graduate. So if that discussion on whether or not that would be happening again, or like because this school year is kind of another challenging year because adjusting back to a pandemic is very difficult, just like life during online learning was. And then one more thing, so like last week on Friday during sixth period, students got their N95 masks from the district. So yeah, that's all I have to report for tonight.
Just want to say ongoing thank yous for all the staff of our district for the incredible amount of work, especially these past, now 3 weeks since we came back to start the new calendar year. I know it's been incredibly difficult, much more challenging than I think anybody ever expected. So just my sincere gratitude and thank you for the amazing work you all are doing right now on behalf of all of our students from top to bottom. I just can't thank you enough. The care that you have for every single person in this district. And just looking ahead, I know we'll vote on it later tonight, but I do want to thank the negotiation teams on both sides, both management and labor, for the incredible amount of work that you guys did to get this together. So thank you in advance. I know more thanks and gratitude will come as we speak later, but I just wanted to say it up front.
Thank you. I do reiterate Mr. Lee's sentiments, and I know for the board, we are just forever grateful to everyone. We're just a great district here, and the heavy lifting that all of you have done. I went to pick up my daughter from school on Friday, and I was happy to see a lot of students leaving school wearing, so many of them were wearing the masks that we had distributed. And I was happy to see that. But the numbers continue to rise, and that's because now students also are taking advantage of the on-site testing, including my daughter and her friends. They just, every Tuesday, that's what they do. And it's a sad state that we're living in, but this is what we have to go through. And long term, I mean, what are we looking at, Back in March of 2020, we're thinking, okay, 2 weeks. Then it kept extending and extending, and what's that word that, Ms. Prest always uses, as pivoting. And I think that we have to start looking at long term, and where's the responsibility going to lie? Because we have to serve our teachers, our staff, and our students. But the work continues, and I attended the Student Advisory Council meeting last night. Fantastic. Just hearing from the students is always good because you get a really good, clear idea of what they're going through. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Van Raphorst.
Thank you. Ms. Presta is attending the Access Superintendent Symposium, and I'm sure she will have a lot of information to share next week, but I do not have anything to report.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Casey with the AFT Local 1481 report.
Everyone, I'd like to announce publicly our voting for the tentative agreement. We had 70% of the members voted. I'd say for the most part, it was an increase in the voting in most of the units. So out of the 5 units, 2 of them were about the same, and then the rest were increases, which was nice. And it was 97% yes. So we were very excited about that. And one of the things that I just wanted to mention is we want California to extend the COVID paid sick leave. I've sent something out for people to sign a petition in the email. So please, if you haven't, please do so. And especially the bus garage, but many people, I have heard the thanks that they've given to Doreen Basuino for her after-school rapid testing of the staff, because, you know, there's a lot of people going. And she's got it, but, you know, it would be great to have help. It'd be great to have it at each site. But she's just whizzing around. It's amazing. She's got it down with her dim sum cart and the swabs. It's good. We really appreciate it. And, you know, especially like I was saying, the bus garage, you know, they're in a small little bus or van with a group of students for up to 45 minutes. So they feel very thankful to be able to go and check as often as they feel they need to, which is a lot every day. So I just wanted to mention that. And that's all I have for today. Thank you.
Yeah,
Associate Superintendent Basuino will be providing that today.
howdy, everybody. So I'm just going to report out for Michelle. As you know, she's doing testing right now out in front there. So our dashboard, we've been working hard on keeping the dashboard up to date. As you know, we've experienced high numbers of reported cases. We want to thank our families for self-reporting. This has been a massive help and crucial for us to keep our community safe. So just a big thank you to our parents and families who are taking this very seriously and self-reporting. Just really want to thank them for that. As some of you have already mentioned, the minute we received our 95 N95 masks from the county, we immediately got them onto the sites and got them distributed to both students and staff. And the intent is to keep handing them out on a weekly basis and to have them accessible for students and staff. PCR testing continues to be offered at each site 1 day a week. Color has experienced an influx of testing statewide, and that has caused delays in staff and students getting the results notification. Rapid testing for staff continues to be offered Monday through Friday, 3:30 to 5:30 in the gallery at the district office. But we are about this close to getting the testing onto the sites and hopefully have that accessible to both students and staff. I'm working with Tina to figure out all the logistics, but I'm hoping that we can have something happening quite quickly. We do have some sites that are already offering it because their administration is doing it. So that's out there, and we're getting close. And then our close contact notifications will begin again this week with revised, updated CDPH and Cal OSHA guidelines. As you can imagine, it's difficult to read these and then try to translate what they're saying. So we've been working to figure out what they are actually saying and meaning. So I just want to thank Michelle and Executive Cabinet for helping me read through it, because it was a little confusing, but we think we got it. And I just want to thank the site administrators and staff who have been tirelessly working to document every single case. That is reported to them, and that is a huge, huge job. And then just to give you an idea, so 2 weeks ago, we made a request to Binax, that's where we get our rapid tests from. We got 2,400, which we were very excited that we received those because we are understanding that some schools aren't getting it. We did make another request this week for an additional 2,400. We think if we keep it under that threshold, that request, that they might actually say yes. But the 2,400 is what we have, and so that's what, when we push it out to the sites, that's what we have. And we'll continue using it until it's either gone or we get more. So I just want you to understand that it's limited to the amount of what we have.
And so that's a request to buy them?
So no,
That's
these are offered to us when we initially went into, I think it was at the beginning of the school year, this was offered to us free from the state of California. So when we get these, they are free for us to use. We are also looking to purchase as well, but we can't find anybody that says they have any. But Michelle Jones is trying to reach out to multiple vendors, thank you, and also asking for different amounts to see if somebody will say yes at a lower amount instead of saying 10,000. So that's our crazy world right now.
So I do have one question. So I don't know if it needs to be here or if there's a plan to talk about like plans for through the end of the year or especially spring break, because I'm thinking that's probably going to be the next surge. And what are we going to do in advance of that? Is it possible for us to get enough rapid tests to send home with students so they have them to test before they come back, et cetera?
Yeah, that is our priority, to try to get some prior to our first break during the spring, to be able to get those out to families. So that's our first, that's Michelle's first priority, is to get those rapid tests so we can send them home with parents like we did with the ones that were given to us from the state.
Actually coming up.
There's less travel for ski week, like last
with
time, if you look
ski
at
week first.
historically, there wasn't much of a bump, but after spring break, there was.
Okay.
That's her number one priority right now.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to explain, I don't know if you understand how the Binax works, is we have 40 tests and 1 active agent, so those aren't really things that can go home. They have to be administered. Okay.
Approve consent.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Do we have any public comment?
We have one public comment, Emily Hansen.
All right.
Hello. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for listening to my comments tonight. I know you've been hearing a lot from me lately, both at our board meetings and Daly City Council meetings. I am not usually one to speak out in this way, but there are too many important things happening to remain silent. I have also dedicated my career to students who attend school here at Serramonte, and believe I am in a unique position to speak about my experience of educating students on this property. I watch all of the board meetings. I've been following along very closely. I have been absolutely heartbroken about the unfair criticism from members of the community, many who speak to our board and admin with cruel language, including profanity. It raises red flags for me that many of these individuals seem to know Trustee Ochapinti by first name. I'm not making any specific suggestions here, but it does make me question what exactly is going on behind the scenes. I need to say that I do not feel supported by Trustee Ochapinti. It's symbolic I'm speaking to an empty chair. I could have easily called in via Zoom to make these remarks, but I feel that I should have the guts to come in person and speak my truth. Trustee Ochapinti's continued commentary about preserving Westmore Park and trying to stop the new adult ed building and DO building is extremely upsetting. I am not sure what the end goal is with this stance, but if it means that my students have to stay here at Serramonte one more minute longer than they need to, this is unacceptable. This building is not suitable, period. Just yesterday, I was hanging out with one of the ATP students at lunch, and he was pointing out all of the broken things in the hallway. And he kept saying, that's why we're getting a new building. This is why we're getting a new school. We need one. He was so enthusiastic, and the student follows along with all of the district news, so he is aware of what's going on. So to think for 1 second that someone or some group is going to try and stop us from giving these students the school they deserve, I just had to come here tonight. Our students deserve better, and they deserve better now. I understand that Trustee Ochapinti speaks about preserving open green space and public land, but can you please put our students' well-being first? Please consider that this opposition to the new school building for my students is going to be very damaging to a very vulnerable community. Once again, I thank the board and our admin for their dedication to our community. I'm very excited about the new building projects. Thank you.
Our discussion item, we'll start with 10A, that's Board Policy 1313, Community Relations on Civility. So, have you guys read it?
Yeah.
Okay, so, yeah, I first learned about this, it was at the CSBA conference where they enacted this in June but hadn't rolled it out yet. And I thought it was very appropriate because it also says that the community must also be held to these standards when in any interactions that we have. It's a two-way street. So, all right, if there's no discussion on that.
I feel like it's timely. I do, while it has been challenging for us, I do also just think about all the school board members across the state that I've talked to that have like much tougher times and are dealing with like really aggressive people that have been coming to their meetings because of mask mandates and different things. So, you know, it's School Board Member Month, so I just send my heartfelt appreciation to all the school board members around the state that are just holding the line on safety.
Yep, it's actually a sad state of affairs that we would have, that CSBA would actually have to present this as a sample policy for districts to consider adopting, that we have to codify civil behavior. So, but I'm grateful that we have it, and I think it'll be good for us as well as for our larger community, both students, staff, and others. So, good to have. Thanks for bringing it.
Hi, Mr. Ochapinti.
Hi.
So we were on discussion item 10A about the proposed board policy on community relations civility. Did you have any questions or comments?
Yeah, I was reading the policy. I think one, in light of the fact that civil discourse is more open and I think maybe accessible in many ways through online platforms, at the same time can be more closed because people's inability to be able to attend public meetings. And just over the course of the past 2 years, a lot of civic engagement has encouraged people to get involved and to speak up and to share their voice. Regardless of where that voice is coming from, I think, you know, given our First Amendment rights, it's important to encourage people to step up and be a part of their community and make those decisions. And so be part of the decision-making process. So I think one, the resolution or the board policy proposed, you know, is a sign of the times. But I also think it's important to recognize that civility is implicit in civic engagement. However, people don't have to agree And I think, like in anything, honesty is the best policy. So when it comes to freedom of speech, we should encourage freedom of speech and not inhibit that in any way. I do think, given the policy, the policies see reflected by some school districts around the state, it's encouraging and promoting that. There is no requirement that people speak a certain way, that they refrain from using cuss words or other language. It's up to them. That's their civil right here in the United States, and so in many countries across the world. And so I do believe that, you know, while it is something to consider, it's actually not totally necessary. In fact, like, you know, was mentioned, codifying it into a policy is one way of approaching things, but I do believe that we already have those laws codified in the First Amendment in our Constitution. And so if we understand the Constitution and promote that, civic engagement becomes much more clear, and that our civil rights are shared, and in that sense, the boundaries between our civil rights are where we don't cross somebody else's civil rights when we're speaking. So non-threatening speech and making sure that we're being civil and respectful, any of those things and all of those things are already codified into law. So I actually don't believe it's a necessary board policy. I think all school districts be very mindful, though this one is recommended by CSBA, they should be very mindful of the fact that they don't overstep and create the illusion or the misconception that they are to somehow limit themselves and their freedom of speech when approaching any public meeting for any reason. That said, I would encourage people to be civil. As a public official, I mean, there are meetings here where I feel like there's been a lack of civility directed towards me. I can ask for people to be civil. I can ask for people to not cross those boundaries, personal, professional, or political. That's not always respected. Over a year and a half of that now, I'm used to it as part of being a public official. And I do think public officials should also be mindful that we're here to hear the public. They're not here just to speak nicely to us. And so I want to hear the public and everything they have to say, regardless of what it is, within the boundaries of where actual law and civil rights are set. So I think it's good to have a first reading. I would like to hear more from the public on this. I know the ACLU has been addressing this nationwide as well, and many other legal and political agencies in terms of responding to the Supreme Court's decision regarding freedom of speech, which does defend our students' right to freedom of speech, both on and off campus. So something like this seems actually unnecessary to me. And I think if we're going to encourage civility, we should do it by engaging our public rather than setting more boundaries down that already exist. So,
Is there anything specific in the policy that causes an infringement on First Amendment rights?
that would be something that was probably already reviewed. I looked at it and I compared it to other districts. And like I said, the policy says it promotes and encourages. So it's not a policy per se as just an encouragement. If there's anything that looks like it's overstepping, then we should either remove the policy altogether or consider completely modifying it to be in accordance with other districts who have more open and more, I guess you could say, relaxed encouragement. But I don't think for it to be a policy almost doesn't make sense, because we're only encouraging something. We're not actually, it's not something you can enforce.
There's lots of policies in that are just encouraging and not enforceable, that just kind of lay the tone about how we expect people to behave, that are not enforceable, that we've also adopted, all of us adopted. So I don't really see the difference there. But if you see anything in here that you think infringes on First Amendment, I'm like, I welcome that change. You know, this is the first that you have time to come back for the next board meeting. But I think I don't mind adopting it, because I think it just kind of sets a tone. And also, like I said, I don't know if you heard before I got in here, kind of helps us stand in solidarity with other school districts who are really getting, treated uncivilly by people that are coming to the board meetings. That we all stand united in saying, while we respect the community also needs to come in here with a certain level of respect. I think that's all this says.
Oh,
The second there are all these references to equity, to positive school climate, to freedom of speech and expression, to meeting conduct. And like Ms. Salahuddin said, we've all passed our board policies regarding how we conduct ourselves at meetings. And unfortunately, it's sad that this is going to be codified, but there was a need for it. And I think it's important that it says the board believes that each person should be treated with dignity and respect in their interactions within the school community. And the board understands that the First Amendment provides strong protection for speech. However, the board expects that all speech and expression will comport with norms of civil behavior on district grounds, in district facilities, during district activities or events, and in the use of district electronic and digital systems and platforms. And that just means that we need to make sure everyone feels safe. And that's not overstepping any bounds of the First Amendment. And that the board and district staff shall model civil behavior as an example of behavior that is expected throughout the district. To me, that's super important because we all feel that way, you know, as board members. And, but we also, you know, students, staff, parents, guardians, and community members shall not communicate or behave in a manner that causes disruption and hinders the orderly conduct of district operations. That's about safety.
So I hear you. I don't think anybody would disagree with safety. I think the discussion revolves around what we define as safety. I'm a teacher, and many of the laws and many of the policies of the past that we know we've had to revise and completely remove, if not reimagine, around disproportionate expulsions, suspensions, in terms of addressing equity in our schools, talking about racial profiling, about gender inequity, and even just supporting our students in need for whatever reason. We've seen that using words like defiance and disruptive can be easily used to target people in the name of safety. So it's actually incumbent upon us as public officials to stand first and foremost with the First Amendment and the protections of people for their civil rights and civil liberties. That's constitutional law. We teach that in our U.S. government classes. We teach that in U.S. history. We teach it as far as we can and wherever we can in the K-12 public education system here in California and throughout the country. So while I hear safety, I'm also hearing shall comport with, you know, certain norms of behavior. You cannot tell somebody how to behave. You shouldn't have the expectation of them, even if what they're doing isn't completely respectful, which I've been disrespected, like I said, many times, not only by people who've been on calls at times, but by members of this board and within our district staff. I've heard no support or defense from any other member of this board in any of those circumstances, except maybe a few, and even in those times it was limited. However, I understand that this is public policy. So this, I understand, I don't disagree with most of this. I think the expectation that we're gonna pass a policy that somehow sets a guideline for people is great to have a guideline, and I get that we have passed policies before speaking to that. This, I believe, is unnecessary, but if some districts are passing it, I'm not totally against it. I think some of the language I would review and compare and contrast with other districts. I don't know that it varies much. It looks pretty standard.
I think that's our job. Like, if you see anything that other districts and the wording is better, bring that back and we'll talk about it at our next meeting.
Yeah, which is what I'm saying. This is the first reading, but that's something. Those are my primary thoughts and observations. And I do believe we should, first and foremost, as the second paragraph starts with, you know, the First Amendment. I wouldn't follow that with however. I think the First Amendment provides those guidelines, and it's up to us to create those conversations before we create policies. Thank you.
Item 10B, job description, summer school principal. Ms. Lujan?
Thank you so much. This evening before you just for discussion is a new job description for the position of summer school principal. At this time and historically, the principal of Thornton High School has served as principal all school year long, as well as the summer school principal. In stepping back, we realize that what we may be missing is an opportunity for leadership opportunities for teachers who may hold administrative services credentials. And so we bring this for you for consideration and open it up to any questions you may have. Also, Dr. Marenko is here should you have any specific questions that I may not be able to get to.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions?
Oh, I think this is a great idea too. And I'm sure, Denny, you might want to have a summer break at some point too, so give you a little bit of a respite. So, no, I think this is a great idea to allow other teachers to have some, to get some experience while they're here
Yeah.
and in our district, so.
A good opportunity.
Totally agree. This is the way we build up the bench, so I like the idea.
Thank you. Now on to our action items. Item 11A1, the AB 841 agreement with LifeWings KFI engineers. Ms. Van Rapworth?
Thank you, President Tejada. As Ms. Salahuddin was talking about earlier, of us continuing to try to get ahead of our COVID response, this is one really great opportunity that's come to us. So before you tonight is an agreement with LifeWings KFI engineers to help us access AB 841 grant funds for indoor healthy air. AB 841 was established that AB 841 established the Healthy Air Plumbing and Efficiency Program, or CalShape. The first round of funding is now available for application. The application is due at the end of the month. And the first round of funding would pay for high-quality MERV filters for our HVAC systems, CO2 sensors to be installed in classrooms, and then an audit of our HVAC systems. Our 3 Daly City schools qualify for the funding. Our 2 Pacifica schools do not because of the economics that they sit in, the economics of the area. And so we would like to have this work done at all of our schools. So what is before you is an agreement that would pay for the Pacifica schools out of bond funds, and then grant funds would pay for the Daly City schools. And this would just be the first round. We may qualify for more upgrades in the future. And in case you have questions about the program, Mr. Richard Doss is here tonight from LifeWings as their representative, and he has more information if you have questions.
Pretty good idea. Great idea, in fact, to be able to get these funds, and thank you that we have somebody who can guide us through the process and do the work for us. So,
Because the deadline's coming up in a few days, and...
yeah, I'd say let's do it.
Yes, Mr. Rojapinti?
Yeah, so thank you for being here. Yeah, is there anything, obviously there's something that, is not just, something we should be doing in the moment, but I'm glad that we're installing these in our schools and, for safety and health for our students and of course, our district community. Is there anything you're seeing, I guess, in your experience in terms of trends or in terms of what you're bringing to the district that it's good to, I guess, start now so that we'll be ahead of what we need for the oncoming year or next few years?
Yeah, so again, my name is Richard Doss. Thank you for allowing us to be here tonight. I appreciate that. I'm a Senior Vice President with LifeWings Peak Performance. And I think if we look at indoor air quality generally and also the equipment that's on the outside, our goal is to really focus on the breathing zone inside. And we'll be taking a look at the indoor spaces, looking at how the air is flowing, and we'll be taking measurements and understanding, are there dead spots, is there stratification? These are the things that we want to look at for all times for indoor air quality, for teachers and students and for health. So it's not just about respiratory viruses or COVID, but the future of education and how we're looking at that. And then, of course, also we'll be looking at all the the equipment on the outside of the building and understanding that. But there's all those different pieces that are involved. So it will be airflow strategy, air distribution strategy, filtering strategy, different equipment that we have and different equipment that we may want to have in the future, because we'll be recommending changes. And Tina's exactly right. There is going to be a second round of funding being announced very shortly. They're planning the workshops, and your underserved schools will qualify and get money for HVAC replacement equipment. And then lastly, I would say monitoring strategy with the CO2 and understanding how are we going to use that to keep the spaces safe for our teachers and our students. And your public health work that you folks are doing here is monumental, I could tell by just hearing some of the work that you're doing in that space, and this will support all of that.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
And just one question, so when we're talking about spaces, we're talking about the entire school, not just like classrooms, but all space, okay.
All spaces, gymnasiums, music rooms, shop, whatever you've got, including the administrative offices naturally, and restrooms, and in any of the spaces, yes, ma'am.
Excited about it.
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Very
coming.
much. Now to item 11A2, facilities rental rates revisions. We had discussed this at the last meeting.
Yep. Yeah, at our last board meeting, this item was brought for discussion, and tonight it's recommended that the board approve the facility rental rates as presented for implementation June 1st.
Approve.
Second.
Mr. Ochipinti, you had your hand raised?
Yeah, we discussed this last meeting. I still am concerned why we're raising rates on anything at this time, given where the economy's at and the public, whether, this is for local, businesses or nonprofits renting out facilities and whatnot. I'm just not sure that it's wise for a public school district to raise the rates on use of public facilities when we're barely reopening them and the public hasn't been able to access them for nearly 2 years. So I think this is ill-timed, if not fully thought out. I do think that we don't need to raise the rates. If anything, we need to maybe think in the other direction so that we can make our facilities more accessible and prioritize even what we're doing. Maybe the first discussion to have before raising any rates is to see how we can prioritize public use of these facilities for those who are not part of organized groups or just officially like businesses and nonprofits, et cetera. And so that discussion, I think, should come first, because once we raise these rates, we might even see a decline in people using our facilities because things are getting more expensive even in public facilities, while we know that many people are struggling with the cost of housing and, of course, are unsure about eviction moratoriums and rent relief and et cetera. So I would actually, the motion's already been seconded, but I would encourage us to remove this item and revisit it at another time.
So as you can see on here, nonprofits have 40% rate reduction, and their rates haven't really gone up. So any nonprofit that wants to rent our facilities, it's extremely cheap. I mean, I don't see an issue. And if you compare our facility rates to any other facility around here, it's pennies on the dollar. So one of the reasons why I want to do this is that the rates are really tied to our staff, right? And I want to be able to pay the staff a living wage, and especially our custodial staff. We don't have the funding to continue to pay custodial staff, especially if they're coming in on the weekends to cover, to do the coverage for the facilities, especially finding someone who's available to do that. We can't do that if we're not paying a wage that, people want to work, and we need to, this is to help cover the people who work for us from organizations that can more than afford to pay for it. So I haven't seen any reduction in the facilities that are used the most, which are our fields. Especially during COVID, that went up because those were outdoor activities that you do outside. So if you looked at Jeff, because I live right near Jeff, you drive by it on the weekend, that parking lot is usually full because the facilities are being rented. So, and again, and the same thing is at Westmore, and they're being rented by nonprofits whose rates have stayed relatively the same. So this is really for organizations like when we have like colleges and other, we've had commercials, people who shot commercials. They can more than afford to pay these rates that we have right here.
Ms. Van Rafford?
I'll just clarify one thing, that the 40% rate is for youth nonprofits, so youth-serving nonprofits. And And the rates have not been raised since 2017, and we know that inflation has gone up quite a bit since then. So the rates really reflect increases in costs of utilities and replacement costs for wear and tear. And as you said, they do match or are below most of the surrounding areas. So they're not designed to make a profit, but to cover our costs.
Okay, and then I mean, what we have to remember is that this is, our first priority should be the students. And if we're going to be renting out our facilities, we have to keep them safe and in working order for our students. And so this protects them, this protects our staff, that they will continue to work in, as the SARCs say, exemplary facilities. And we haven't raised our rates since 2017. Yes, Mr. Lee.
And we also have 2 state-of-the-art theaters that are part of this facilities rental fees, which are with very competitive rates. When you think about the organizations that would be most likely to want to rent these, which are local performing arts schools, who would then charge admission to their performances, which will more than cover the cost of renting the facilities, which I know I've certainly had experience with over the years when my kids were in a performing arts school. I know Ms. Tejada with her daughter as well. So I think these rates are more than fair. And even when you look at local schools who might be looking to rent theaters for middle school graduations, these are rates that are more than affordable, since parents typically fundraise to help offset those costs for those organizations as well. So I think this is fine. I believe we do have a motion that's been seconded on the floor.
Yes, so we have a motion.
So
We have a second.
I still have some discussion relevant to that. So that's what I was saying, actually, is we should be student-centered. So we should not be prioritizing making money off facilities that, and I would ask Acting Superintendent Van Raffhorst, how much money do these facilities generate for our district? It was said that this is funding our classified staff, or those, working maintenance. Our staff are paid out of our general budget. Am I incorrect in saying that? Because I believe this is not what funds jobs exclusively. That's a much bigger funding pool. So how much does this?
That's not what I said, though. I just said it was to cover those days, not
Yeah.
the.
And
so-
if we are subsidizing people using our facilities, if what we're charging is not covering the utilities and the wear and tear on the facilities, then it does hit the general fund and it does impact salaries. So we need to make sure that what we are allowing people to use is covered by the fees that were charged. And that is all that this is intended to do.
I see. What I was going to ask was how much money do we actually make off of these rates, and how much overtime or pay are our workers getting out of that? Because you're saying it's breaking even. I'm wondering if the cost of the profit that we're making off is so minimal that our priority should not be the profit that we're making off of renting out our facilities. Maybe our priority should be simply blocking out times for, say, our football fields, like, say, at Westmore, to be open to the public in the Westmore community or any other high school, instead of renting them out to, say, other organizations that can get prime time on those fields or in those facilities. I do think we should prioritize it first. I think most of the time I would imagine we're doing that, but I would think that our discussion should actually be in the direction of lowering our fees and creating more access for our students, and
Sorry,
instead
so
of
what's your question for Ms. Van Raffhorst? You wanted,
how much money do we actually make out of this?
So prior to COVID, we brought in about $1 million a year in rental fees, but that was to offset the costs of those, of the use of the facilities. Since COVID, we have brought in less, but as Mr. Lee was saying, we do still rent out our fields, and as soon as it's safe to do so, we would like to let the community back into our facilities.
This is my second question, thank you for that, is how much is the cost of wear and tear to our facilities where the offset is. We're making $1 million pre-COVID. It's a lot of money.
But a lot of that money goes back out to pay the salaries of the people who work the events. So what you're asking is not something that I have numbers at the top of my head.
That's fine. That's a lot of money. I'm not sure if we pay $1 million in staff.
Overtime?
In staff, maintenance for the facility use. If we are, I'm glad we're funding our maintenance employees that way. I think it's hard to believe that our maintenance staff is making that $1 million back, or that the $1 million is going right back into refurbishing our facilities when we've passed bond measures to do that specifically. So I'm wondering where the emphasis is in terms of raising these rates, just for anybody, even local businesses, if it's necessary, and how much, where those numbers are before passing something like this.
Our budget is about $65 million a
Right.
year in general fund. And so 1 million of that is very reasonably could be used to, for our routine maintenance and upgrades to facilities like soccer nets and basketball nets that get used in these events. And, it goes on and on. So I'd be happy to sit down with you and go over the budget if you'd like to.
No, I'm familiar with the budget. I'm looking at this item today. I'm just wondering why the emphasis would be on raising our fees at this time during a pandemic. I just feel it's ill-timed and perhaps should be revisited later. That's my thoughts on that.
Well, there's a motion on the floor. There's a motion to approve. A second. I'm gonna call.
I mean, I hear what you're saying, and so have we in the past, when people have petitioned the district to use a facility and said that they don't have the funding to cover it, have we allowed them or worked with them to use the facility?
If it is connected to our students, our programs, we definitely have. Anything that is connected to our students or our programs typically use the facilities for free.
So there are ways that if someone is in the community and wants to use a facility and doesn't have the funding to pay for this, they can do that. And the reason why I asked the question is because I know a couple of organizations that have done that. So maybe we look into that and making sure that people know that that is a pathway. But I don't know if there's a huge need. I haven't heard, because the reason why I know this is the one time that somebody couldn't use a facility, they made an issue of it. We changed the policy, that hasn't been an issue. So if there was a huge issue of people trying to get into our facilities and they didn't have access due to funding, then I would move on this. But I have not heard any of that.
Okay, no, that's good to hear. I have heard from community members who were concerned that our campuses are gated, say on the weekends or after hours when they want to use one of the athletic facilities, the fields, which are open and not being used during school hours. I don't think they should need to petition the board to be able to walk into a facility and use it. When I grew up, I could go to a baseball field or a track or a basketball court, and I could just use that. That is not the case today. My concern is that if we're renting it out and we're booking those times, I used to work Park and Rec and run these programs too, then when those times are booked out and you see another organization, say it is a paying organization, as a community member who doesn't have the money or who lives in the area who might want to use it, then you're not being prioritized, your access, and maybe as a student, whether you're part of a student group, should not matter. You should be able to walk on if you're a family member, if you want to go for a walk and get in some good exercise. You should be able to do that, I think, at any of our campuses primarily. I think we should rethink our policies and how we approach that before thinking about how we're going to make money off of our public facilities, which are funded by taxpayers. So
This is not about making money off the facilities, as I've said a number of times. It's about recouping the costs that it creates for the school district to open our facilities to these organizations.
And there are wear and tear issues. I mean, you can see the use of the bathrooms, the use of they do damage. Sometimes there's issues with people coming, cleaning the cafeteria, cleaning up after them. There are issues that require us spending money in order to allow the public to use the facilities. I think part of the bond was allowing open access to our facilities, but that doesn't mean for free. I think we're not making money. And even if we were making money, I don't think that's bad either. There's a school district in Southern California who's using their facilities and the rental of their facilities to fund their arts program. I thought that was amazing. So I think that if there was an issue with public access and with people who didn't have the funding and needed to use the facilities, I would be more than happy to entertain and talk to those people about the use of the facilities if they're based in our community when the need arises. But for the majority of the people who use our facilities, they're not having a problem with the use fee. I think it's an entirely separate issue about public access to our schools on the weekends, which I hear and understand, but at the same time, having been on the campuses when they're open on the weekends and having to really monitor people just walking off the street at Jefferson and walking on a campus, it was nice having the school staff there to keep just anybody who wasn't coming from testing coming on, including people like skateboarders and stuff who were doing damage to the property by using it as a skate park. So, I mean, I think there's lots of different pluses and minuses to just opening up the campus, which would cause more damage that we would then have to repair. So we would need the funding to come from somewhere.
I hear what you're saying. One, I support our local youth who skateboard. There are no skate parks in Daly City now. There are like a couple empty lots where that were a skate park. There's one that's going to be supposedly planned to be rebuilt. So as a school district who do provide public facilities, athletic facilities for our youth, it is actually the same concern. I see them as the same issue, one and the same. And our public does pay for these facilities. Anybody anybody in public has a right to be able to use public facilities. And so I understand recouping the cost. I do understand that. Like I said, I used to work for the city and running some of these programs. But that's the cost of being a public agency. We're here for the public. And so I think our primary priority should be in looking to expand and provide and promote access to our public use facilities, whether it's walking on a track and letting people know, hey, our track is open every day after school and on the weekend. If somebody we're also renting it to other organizations, but we want to make sure that it's open for the public. We should be prioritizing not just both, but more of our students and families within our district, and of course the public at large, before any other private organizations, whether, of any.
I think I understand.
Yes, so that's what I'm saying.
I think that's a separate issue from this facilities rental rates revisions. What's before us right now, and there's a motion on the floor and there's a second. I appreciate the discourse and, and I understand your concern. I hear that from the public as well. It's just, right now we're talking about these rental rates. And Mr. Lee, you have your hand up.
Yeah, my only comment is, we are talking about the rental of all of our classrooms. The field is a classroom.
Right.
The
Field's a
track is a classroom. The theater is a classroom. So our priority here as board members is to make sure that we are covering the costs of the use of our classrooms. So that's my one comment.
Okay. So I would like to vote on this.
Can I call the question? You good?
I've already called to revisit this item.
So I'm going to call, roll call vote, please.
No.
Aye.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, item 11A3, public disclosure of proposed bargaining agreement with American Federation of Teachers Local 1481.
Thank you, President Tejada. AB 1200 stipulates that school districts must make a disclosure of costs of any collective bargaining agreement. The public disclosure document includes the financial impact of the proposed tentative agreement with AFT, as well as all of the financial impacts for unrepresented groups of employees. This disclosure was shared with the County Office of Ed, and they have agreed that JUHSD will be able to meet the projected costs of this negotiated increase. So I recommend that the board approve this public disclosure of collective bargaining agreement.
You have a question, Mr. Butcher-Kenzie?
Of course, yeah. I'll wait for anybody else if you have any questions first.
No. You had your hand raised.
Sure. Yeah, so, yeah, it's good to see that we have an agreement here. I did read the JUHSD salary disclosure for all employees 2021, 2022 to 2022, 2023, except food service from the San Mateo County Office of Education. And I hear you, Mr. Van Raphorst, that they do agree that we will be, it's possible to do this. I know they also advised to be careful about deficit spending. They're saying that it's reducing our reserves from 11.92 to 4.11%. by 2023, 2024, and so on and so forth. Being familiar with these issues, and that these are conservative estimates in terms of where our revenue will be in the coming years. However, given recent years, they may go up with the economy being what it is. What are your thoughts, given their concern, in what ways do you feel that we can alleviate that drop in our reserves in the next few years?
So every time we have a presentation of the budget, we go over those different items that we may want to do this or we may want to do that. So when we do the second interim report, there'll be a chance for us to talk about what the projected reserves are. When we do our budget planning for next school year in April-ish, there'll be an opportunity for us to talk about that. So every decision around, what we do to reduce spending or to increase the reserve is something that we talk about at each of those phases. The minimum reserve required is 3%, and we will be substantially above that, even with the conservative estimates.
Okay, yeah, it says theirs is do you agree that their estimate was 4.11%?
It's my estimate that they agreed with, yes.
Yeah, that's 1.11% above 3%.
Yeah, and that's in 23, 24, and it's always when you're talking about those out years, you are definitely going to be wrong. It's so far out there that it's not going to be, if it's 4.11% at the end of that year, then it's like winning the lottery. It will always be different. And we just need to watch that as the years go by and as we track our spending and we track our income. And that's why we have interim reports twice a year and an opportunity to revisit those.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. This is the letter from the San Mateo County Office of Education. That's
Analyzing the AB 1200 document that I provided, yes.
Yes, correct. Yeah, and as a teacher, one of the issues I think that often with teachers and teachers unions that we represent is how much money is in our district reserves and how much can the district afford to really spend. And I think we've gone on our way to make sure that we build that labor management collaboration so that we can have these discussions and come to these conclusions. I'm just reading this to make sure that this is accurate and it's consistent with everything that we're doing. So thank you.
Move to approve.
Second.
Oh, Mr. Alvarez?
Inflation taken into consideration with the salaries?
So, I think the board has made it clear, and as agents of the board, when we negotiate, we take our cue from the board, which is that they want to see salaries raised as much as possible. And so I think that was what we went into the negotiations with. As far as inflation, when I'm budgeting, I take that into consideration for the costs of materials, the costs of utilities and things like that, so that when we see what is available for salaries, we give as much as we can. And so whether or not the raise will cover inflation for every one of our employees is probably not the case, but we can say that we have tried to make the raise as high as possible while being fiscally responsible.
Thank you.
I will also say it's why, I'm particularly so passionate about finding other sources of revenue for our school district so that we can protect our reserves and that we can give as much as money and raises as possible while still being fiscally responsible. So that's why I'm so passionate about finding and continuing to look for other sources of revenue that we can continue to hold up our district. Because while we have had successful revenue measures in the past, as you say, Ms. Trustee Abuzaria, cost of living continues to go up. So you never hit that ceiling where you're like, okay, we have enough money, because it continues to be more and more expensive to live here. And then you never know what's going to happen. Like a pandemic can happen and it can cause the cost of everything to go up. So we have to be vigilant, especially since our revenue in this school district is really tied to businesses and sales and not so much on property tax, because our property tax revenue is so much lower. It's the boost that we have are from businesses here, and we don't know the stability of businesses and if they're going to continue. So we need to be able to support ourselves on our own locally, and that's why I continue to drive to do so.
Just to speak to that too, I think one of the reasons that we talk about these issues, and it's a good observation, good question. Is it about inflation? It's a 1 year, 4.7 raise. It's a little more than maybe in past negotiations. If you look at it, it varies that way. For any of our students studying high school econ and seeing inflation in the news today, it could be exciting and alarming at the same time, because inflation affects those of us in our communities the most who have the least income. And sometimes it's because of natural disasters. Our economy is not run by natural disasters. It's run by economists and businesses who set the price of things, regardless of whether or not that can be controlled through public policy. I do want to add, though, that the primary source of income for our school district is through property tax revenue, and that funds school districts across our state and, of course, the nation. So I will continue, as I always have, as an educator and as an activist and as a school board member, to champion that we use public policy in all the responsible ways to fund and fully fund public education, not just here in Daly City, but in every low-income school district in California, and of course, across our nation, and finding those solutions through public policy instead of looking to private enterprise, because revenue strategies in our district have not been successful in the past. We know that because Serramonte High School was opened twice and closed twice, and that's proof that we need to find larger solutions that uplift all of our school districts and not just some of our districts who simply choose to trade in one resource or school property for raising revenue necessarily. So I believe that this is a strong step in supporting our staff. I'm glad that we're giving our raises to our staff with whatever we have at this point, and I think that at this time, given inflation and a lot of things in our society, that we continue to look for those resolutions through innovative and legitimate public policy solutions, including elections and initiatives that time and again have either passed or failed depending on California as a state and even our local districts, which I will say have voted in our district many times to support through parcel taxes and bond measures. And so I want to thank the community for that and thank our staff for approving this and working together to come to this resolution.
We had a motion for a second?
Yeah.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Ms. Lujan, the approval of tentative agreement with American Federation of Teachers Local 1481.
Good evening. Before you this evening is the tentative agreement between, with the American Federations of Teachers, Local 1481. It includes contract language updates that both parties have agreed to, as well as revised salary schedules for the current school year, as well as the subsequent school year, and revised calendars for the 22-23 school year, as well as the 23-24 school year. As President Casey shared earlier, this agreement was approved by 97%.
Great. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
And let's see, item 11B2, the salary schedule revision for unrepresented employees.
Thank you. The next item this evening is the salary schedule revision for the unrepresented employees. It extends the same raise that was offered or that was agreed upon by AFT 1481 and the district, so it keeps things consistent for different unit members.
All right. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
And item 11B3, amendment to the superintendent contract.
Thank you. The next item this evening is an amendment to the superintendent's contract. The amendment to the superintendent's contract is the same increase that was afforded to members of AFT 1481. So again, it keeps things consistent for all members or employees.
Okay. You have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
11B4, job description update, Director of Behavioral Health.
Thank you. This item is a job description update in collaboration with the Daly City Youth Health Center. What they wanted to do was use the job description to highlight some of the amazing things about the culture of the Daly City Youth Health Center. So the beginning of the job description speaks a bit about the culture and community within the staff there. And it also provides some updates to certification requirements. The previous job description had references to certification requirements that are no longer applicable. So Daly City Youth Health Center provided those updates.
Okay, thank you.
Move to approve.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Consideration of future agenda items? Anyone?
I had spoken to you before about, and I know Trustee Ochipiti has brought this up, about the student trustees being able to join via Zoom. And I know we're having our work study, and but I would like to, I know it's been crazy, and it could just be a discussion between us. I would like to have just a board work study to see if we can revisit equity issues. We kind of stopped that work because of the never-ending COVID issues, but and I think as part of that, I know Superintendent Presta, again, she's been extremely overwhelmed with everything that's happening, so, but I know Trustee Ochipiti had also brought forward, and this could be part of the equity discussion, the translation, and we had spoken to someone that can provide translation services, so seeing if we can like talk about all of that at once.
Okay. Very important. All right. We adjourn tonight's meeting in honor of Angela Belante. Angela Belante was hired July 1st, 1953. While at JUHSD, she served as a teacher and librarian and also served on numerous district and school committees until her retirement in 1989. After retirement, Ms. Belante participated in JUHSD's Early Retirement Projects Program, where she continued to work in our libraries until 1993. Ms. Belante passed away on December 23rd, 2021. She is survived by her two brothers, Anthony and Frank Belante, and two nieces, Amber Belante and Dana Belante Machado. We, the Jefferson Union High School District Board of Trustees, send our condolences to Ms. Belante's family, friends, and host of loved ones. Get a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.